Hey guys, Nathan from Arms of Illum here, and I'm going to do a little bit different video than I typically would do. If you watch other videos on the channel, you're probably used to seeing custom saber builds, commissions, and reveals that I do following those. Now, but today we're gonna take a slightly different look at one of my favorite commercially available lightsaber replicas, and kind of go over why that's the case. And then we're also going to talk about the conversion process to turn it into something just a little bit more than it is out of the box. Since I mentioned conversion, you're probably not surprised to hear that it is the Hasbro Black Series Darth Vader lightsaber. Now you're probably like, well, Nathan, you do custom builds. Like, why are you such a fan of the Black Series lightsaber? Well, it's actually fairly simple. This is a pretty good replica, at least visually. Now there are some things, like we'll cover here in a minute, that I would like to see changed. Certainly electronically it's not the most impressive, but when it comes down to having a good visual representation of Darth Vader's lightsaber from A New Hope, it's actually pretty solid. Now, like I said, it is the replica of the A New Hope version. Now how can you tell that? Most notably, you'll see that the T-track grips here, which are rubber coated, they feel great, although I have heard in time, and I haven't experienced this because I don't typically duel with my lightsabers or anything like that, that these will break down. This rubber finish will start to get sticky and all that stuff. But at least out of the box, and having been displayed for a few months in my house, it looks perfectly fine, feels great. But these rubber T-tracks, since it is a New Hope version, end short of the emitter, or sorry, the clamp. If it were the Empire Strikes Back version, these would go all the way up to the clamp here. Another thing is that the clamp actually has a clamp. It's got a little lever here. It's non-functional on this model. If this were a real MPP flash gun, that would actually, you could open it up and then open up the bottom part of the flash gun, insert batteries and stuff like that. So this is a little bit different than the real thing, kind of lacks some of that functionality, but it looks the part. You'll see that the bubble strip right there resembles the one from the actual prop, and in this case this is the switch. It is a latching switch. So it's a little bit different too from other sound enabled builds because it is a latching switch rather than a momentary one. Moving on up, you can see that this replica has the proper B, E, S, and E stampings that would be there on the real thing. Some of like the Corbanth MPP 2.0 doesn't have that. So even though that is a highly respected replica slash fan take on this hilt, this actually does have some things that are better than that one. Now that is a fantastic kit, and I wouldn't turn anybody away from building on that, but there are some differences, and some things lean one way or the other. At the front here we have a plastic emitter, although it does feel quite durable. Don't really worry about it. And then you've got some detail screws back there, which are non-functional, at least as it comes out of the box. When you do a conversion, those things end up being like your blade retention and conversion unit retention screws. Then you've got a D-ring right here, which happens to be metal, but it is very stiff. So I don't know if anybody actually plans on using that, but certainly in the saber stock form it is a little stiff. And this isn't exactly the easiest saber to carry when it's in its stock form either, and we'll get into some of why that is in a moment. Finally, the other important difference with the A New Hope version versus the Empire Strikes Back version is that if you look, I'm going to set, this is we're resting on the flat of the emitter, but the clamp is actually offset by about, I believe it's like 30 degrees. So that's another telltale sign that this is a New Hope replica. Most of the hilt is constructed out of metal. It is quite heavy. Just a few plastic parts like the emitter, like some of these screws on the back side, like the clamp, and then you've got the rubberized T-tracks back here. So we'll talk a little bit about the internals of the hilt and then go from there to a discussion about the blade. One of the nice things about the way this operates versus, like, say, a custom build that uses a chassis and a battery pack or a single cell that's all housed in here and wired up, is that this, by unscrewing this retaining ring, you can actually take the entire battery pack out. Try not to drop it, but out slides the pack. The pack has 3 AA batteries, and it also contains the speaker. So rather than, like, for example, I always get a little bit worried, like when I'm playing around with one of my custom builds, or I'm sending it off to its new owners, that a repeated removal and reinsertion of the battery / the chassis does put strain on the wires. Now, I try and keep my solder connections very strong, but you never know, like, things break. This is much more foolproof. I mean, there you have it. It pops right out. Pop in the batteries, and then, as you see, it has a little yellow arrow. That yellow arrow matches up with one inside the hilt. So it literally is just as easy as dropping it in and then turning it until you find the right orientation, pushing it in, and then reinserting the ring. Screw it down, and everything is tightly locked up. There is a soundboard in this, but unlike the soundboards that I would do in, like, an MHS V6 chassis or something like that, where they're down here in the hilt, the Hasbro Black Series soundboards are up here, closer to the emitter and the blade. In fact, the soundboard in this saber is connected to the blade via some pins, but we're not going to show that because that would require a full teardown. So outside of that, I think that pretty well covers the hilt. Like I said, the switch is the bubble strip here, which you just simply press up towards the emitter, and it locks in place, and then the saber activates, the LEDs and the blade come on, and then you just turn it off by returning it to its original position. It's a little bit interesting. It's an interesting take for a sound-enabled saber. Like I said, most boards use a momentary switch or something of that nature. The other thing to consider, at least that I've run into with this guy, is that when you've got the saber activated and the switch is in its forward position here, if I'm holding it like this, the underside of my palm here will sometimes hit the switch and turn the thing off. That's a little bit of an annoyance that is fairly easily rectified, but it's also one of those things that's like, really? Like, come on. This is probably, it's really just as simple as making sure the switch doesn't have any overhang there, and some of them do. So a little bit of a bummer, but nonetheless, that's basically how the hilt itself works. The blade is non-removable and houses a string of, I believe, 64 red LEDs. Those LEDs are in sections down the blade, and then are wired to the board in parallel so that the board can individually address those sections and light them up in sequence, causing a scrolling effect as you activate the saber and deactivate it. It's cool, but as you'll see on camera here, it's not smooth because you've got segments of LEDs that are activating in sequence. It's just not quite the same as if, like, for example, you were using one of the relatively new NeoPixel strips where you can individually address each LED. It's just not as smooth as that. So for what is a $150 replica, it's not bad, but also at the same time, like, I could almost do without the effect just because it's kind of mediocre. It also is a little bit slow. You'll see that as well. This is something that's, there are some differences between the Master Replica lightsabers and the Hasbro, even though Hasbro essentially took those designs over after Master Replicas went out of business. But one of the things I've noticed between the two is There are some differences with the soundboards. For example, several of the Master replicas didn't have clash effects and stuff like that when you hit the saber against something. They just didn't make a different noise. The Hasbros have that. They also, it seems to me, that many of the Master replicas had a faster activation / deactivation effect, such that the blade looked smoother simply because everything happened so quickly. Here, it's a little bit slow, especially on this Darth Vader. I think it varies a little bit from model to model, but definitely one of those things that you notice kind of takes you out of the experience of, oh, this is like a real lightsaber, because it's just kind of choppy. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and turn this on, and I'll show you some of the sounds. I'll notice before we get the sound going and it gets a little loud, this thing has fast swing sounds, has slow swing sounds, has clash sounds, a few of those, and then activation and deactivation. But the sound selection itself is very, very limited. That's one of the reasons that I often convert these, like I do a total conversion, not just an LED conversion, because the sounds are a little bit limited. Also, you'll want to listen closely, because this guy doesn't really sound like Darth Vader's lightsaber from the movie. Darth Vader's lightsaber has a very, very distinct sound that is unlike really any other lightsaber in Star Wars. It's got a very low but stable hum, and then this just is very generic. So it's kind of one of those things, kind of bummer, but like I said, we're dealing with a $150 replica that most people are going to be A-okay with. So it's just the enthusiasts like me, and like I know several of you that are watching, that probably go crazy about this stuff. So we'll go ahead and turn it on. As you can see, it's a little bit choppy as it deploys up the blade. But then when you've got it active, the sensitivity on this is pretty good. Swing it around, it registers almost every swing. Just good. Sometimes a little iffy on the speeds, but that happens with even high quality boards. You've got the clash. Got a couple different sounds there. Now, unlike custom builds that I typically do, this does not have any flash on clash, and it also doesn't have any blade flicker. The blade flicker I can absolutely do without on the Darth Vader, because there's most instances of Darth Vader's lightsaber being on in the film show a static blade. So I'm okay with that, but the flash on clash would be a nice thing to have. I realize that when you've got a strip of LEDs, it wouldn't exactly be cost effective for Hasbro to then run a white strip alongside it and have it flash. I think that's something that's a little more reserved for custom builders and things like that, but it would be a nice touch, or at least a flicker you could do, but that's not here. It's also not that loud. I'm having no trouble speaking over this. So, all in all, the electronics are what they are. I'm going to go ahead and turn the saber off. Certainly, I would call them a little bit dated. For the most part, and I know I mentioned the flash, or not the flash, but the clash sounds. Some of that stuff has come later, but for the most part, these are still like 15-year-old electronics. I think Master Replicas first came out with the Force Effects lightsabers in 2002, so that means that like I said, this is like 15 years old. From a technology standpoint, yes, there have been some changes to the LEDs over time. If you look at a Hasbro lightsaber, it might not be the same exact color as, or at least blade color as a Master Replica's. That has more to do with like LED suppliers and bin numbers than really anything. Yeah, you might see some brightness variations and stuff, but for the most part, these are still the same. They're certainly not using the brightest LEDs out there on the market. And I'll actually go ahead and, I forgot to show you that. I mean, that's not that bright, in all honesty. Because if it were very bright, as I hold it up to the camera, it would wash out everything else, and it certainly doesn't. You can see me in the background just fine. There's the tip. Yeah, the tip's kind of obvious too, but that happens. That sort of comes with the territory when you're dealing with lightsabers. I could have a whole video on that, and I may well, because I've got one of the Saber Starlight blades, but we'll not get into that here. But as you can see, it's even. It's fairly even. There's a little bit of a corncob effect if you looked at it, which means that you can sort of see where individual LEDs are. You can't actually see the LED, but you can see like the spacing between them if you look closely. Otherwise, it's pretty good. Now, the only other bummer about mine, and it's a otherwise fantastic, is I'm going to see if I can get, yeah, you see that? It's got a speck of dust inside the blade. And because the blade isn't removable, there's not much I can do about that. So it's obvious when the saber's on. It's actually more obvious when the saber's on than when it's off. Because well, the blade's not all that bright, and it doesn't wash that out either. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. So I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I would discuss why we do conversions to these. There are a variety of reasons. There are a variety of things you gain when you do that. Depending on the type of conversion and the amount of money you want to spend on it, it kind of opens up or unlocks different advantages. One of the most common things you'll see people do is they'll keep the stock soundboard. A lot of people are completely fine with the way these sound, and that's cool. It's a if you've already got it, you might as well use it type situation. So they'll keep the stock soundboard, but they'll replace the LED with an in-hilt LED. Most of the time, that is a single die solution, and either like a red or even one of the deep red / photo red LEDs. And then what that allows you to do is actually remove the blade and then use whatever your favorite, removable blade solution is out there. In that case, and I'll show you one here in a minute. In that case, like I said, your retention screws and stuff are back here on the back side of the emitter, and it's actually really nice. It's really handy. Occasionally, you'll have people who also use like a Tri-Cree LED. That's fine. The only thing is that you're not actually getting the most out of that when you put a Tri-Cree in here. This board and the batteries are really only able to push a certain amount of current to the LED, and you're not going to take full advantage of a Tri-Cree. You're not going to be able, like for example, if you did a Tri-Cree 3-up red or deep red, you're not going to be able to push 3 amps to, 1 amp for each die to that LED. It's just not realistic. You're not going to be able to do it with this board. You're not going to be able to do it probably with the batteries either. So there are some downsides to not doing the full-on conversion. That being said, it is a decent option if you just want increased brightness, because, and I don't have a 1-up red saber here right now, but it is significantly brighter just with a single in-hilt LED. Now, I'm going to set this down for a moment and grab another Darth Vader that I recently completed, and this one is a total conversion. By total conversion, I mean it's got a new LED in it, it's got a new battery solution, an 18650 lithium ion, and it has a totally new soundboard. In this case, the Spark 2 from Nigon. When you do this, not only do you get a removable blade, which is simply, and this is using the TCSS conversion kit, and it's actually, I want to point out, I'm not going to remove it here, but that is a fantastic conversion kit. One of the easiest ones to do out there because everything is pre-tapped. It just drops right in after you remove the plastic. Basically, there's kind of like a plastic chassis inside of these, but it's not like the chassis we're used to where you can kind of slide it out and stuff or do like crystal reveals. It's nothing like that. It's really just holding all the parts together inside the saber. But after you remove that, you literally just slide the TCSS part in, screw it in. It's super simple. But with it comes with a new screw up here, the top, a knurled screw. That's actually now the blade retention screw. So if I unscrew it, boom, out pops the blade. Now I have a standalone hilt. And the TCSS conversion is actually really nice because I'm not going to turn this on and blind you all, but the blade holder is also the LED holder, and everything's retained in there such that I actually don't need a blade plug. So yes, I recommend using one if you can. I found that this unit is a little bit tight. It's really close to like the 1-inch specs, so a lot like my Ultra Sabers blade plugs are very tight in there. They don't, in fact, they require a good bit of sanding to even get in there. But if you don't want to use one and you're going to be careful with it, not shine anybody's eyes, you don't have to because everything's retained. I'm going to go ahead and put the blade back in. This is an Ultra Sabers mid-grade blade that has been sanded with 150 grit sandpaper for better diffusion. I am not at all a fan of the light in a tube effect that most mid-grade style blades give you, so I went ahead and sanded it. But the nice thing about doing that with a mid-grade versus like one of their Ultra Edge or just any generic trans white blade is this still stays very true to the red color. You don't get any of the washout or anything like that. So most people are probably going to be a fan of that look versus the other. It's a matter of personal preference though. Everything else here on this hilt is mainly the same as the one I just showed you. There are some unique changes I have made. First off, because I used the Spark 2 board and not the not a Nano Biscotti, which I would normally have used, I could retain the latching switch. Nigon has made the Spark 2 and his other boards compatible with latching switches, which is nice. I mean, it's not like the end of the world if I couldn't use it, but I thought it was kind of a nice touch. Then, since it also supports, actually, if you're going to use a latching switch with this board, you pretty much have to have a momentary switch. So I hid, and I'm not sure if you can see it real well, I hid a momentary switch right here. Just a little tactile momentary switch that I buried inside the clamp and then drilled a hole so it could stick out. And it's almost invisible, which is really cool because it's black and that spot's black there. So it's really well hidden, and it's in a decent spot such that you don't really accidentally hit it when you're, if you're going to duel with this saber. I'll also say this is not my favorite saber I don't duel in general, but this would not be my first pick for a dueling saber simply because, well, there's too much going on. But you could, especially now that it's been converted, you don't have to worry about breaking LEDs in the strip and having dead spots like that. So that's another one of the advantages of doing one of these, is that you could theoretically duel with it. But I digress. So we've got a new LED, new blade, dual worthy setup there. We've got 2 switches that I've added here. And I'm not going to remove this right now, but basically I've created a new chassis in here using PVC. Turns out that 1-inch Schedule 40 PVC fits perfectly inside of these with just a little bit of wiggle room. So I've got the board, the battery, a speaker, which is a 2-watt bass speaker from TCSS. Everything's self-contained inside this chassis, and then I've actually gone ahead and, using an MPS pommel insert, have added a recharge port in the back, and you can see the kill key there. So you add a lot of features by converting these, and like I said, it's really not that difficult. When you start to take everything out prior to installing the new conversion components, you realize that this thing is like a really large, wide open tube. And there's really nothing easier than a really large tube to install, to do a custom install in. I mean, you're not dealing with tight, cramped spaces. You're not going to do like a crystal reveal on this. Overall, it's very easy. Now, I'm gonna turn this on in a second, and you're gonna be able to see the difference in the brightness with. This is a Tri-Cree LED setup. It's got a deep red, a red, and a white. I believe actually the deep red's a photo red, but regardless, the deep red kind of brings it more to a natural red versus the orangey look. It's probably still going to look a little orange on camera. It still looks a little bit orange in person, but that's kind of how red LEDs work. I did that rather than 2 deep reds because, one, this is going off to a friend, and I wanted him to have the brightest possible saber. And if you go with a photo red or a deep red, it doesn't look quite as bright because of the wavelength of the light. So I'm willing to give in a little bit and give a little bit of that orangey color just to get it a little bit brighter. So I'm going to turn that on. You're going to see the brightness difference. And then you're also going to hear the sound difference. So in order to actually activate this saber, I've got to pull the kill key, which is notched, but it's also very small. Alright, and you can hear the boot sound. That's the Spark 2 default boot sound. I haven't changed anything about that. And now, we're going to hit the latching switch. Well, first I'm going to go to the Darth Vader font. There are 3 different font banks on this saber because it uses the Spark 2, and the Spark 2 also has a saber track, which is basically turns your saber into a music speaker, and in this case I've loaded it with the Imperial March. I've actually got a full breakdown of this saber in another video, so I won't really go into all those features, but I'm going to hit the auxiliary switch here and go to Lord Blako's Vader 1, which is a very, very good Rogue One inspired sound font that he put together. Really one of my favorite sound fonts out there, but I'm also I'm biased because Darth Vader is one of my favorite characters. So we'll go to that. And that's one of I actually chose that out of the effects sounds. That's not the default boot, but it sounds awesome. Okay, now we're going to turn it on. So you'll notice you lose the scrolling, but one of the ways that these boards, such as Nigons, such as Plectors, overcome that is they have a fade-in effect. So that combined with the construction of these blades sort of makes it look like it's scrolling open. Now, it's much faster because you're talking about this, speed of light, or you're talking about the ramp-up effect of the light's brightness. It's not the same. It's certainly never going to be quite as cool as having the blade kind of extend out of the lightsaber, but it does a decent job of approximating that, and I think actually looks pretty movie accurate. The first thing you're probably noticing, one, is that it looks like this has a white core. While that would be awesome if we could do that, and it would be so realistic to the films, this doesn't actually have a white core at all. It's really just like a very, very bright red, slight bit of orange, like I said, especially when you're in this lighting, which I've got almost every light on in this room. So it's a little bit orange. If you turn the lights down, it would look a little bit redder, but this is pretty good. You can also see that, look at the light it's throwing on me right now. If I turn the lights off in here and the switch is on the other side of the room, so I'm unfortunately not going to do that, you would notice that it lights up the whole room. The Force Effects saber, not a chance. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this up close, and you can see. I mean, remember when I had the Force Effects out, and I'm going to pull it out in just a second so we can see a comparison, but you'll notice that you can still see me in the background. Look at how this is washing out that picture. I would estimate that this is like 3 or 4 times brighter, but it's hard to say. I don't want to say it's that X number of times brighter. It's just a lot brighter. With this, because you have customizable sound fonts via an SD card, this actually sounds like Darth Vader's lightsaber. Sounds exactly like it. Like he's standing there in the hallway and activates that saber before laying waste to rebels and all that stuff. Well, this sounds right. And also, I'm going to turn it off real quick. You gain multiple activation sounds. Now that's something that is specific to this board. It depends on the board that you choose, but you kind of get the picture. The sound experience is a lot more Vader-like, or a lot truer to the character in general. You also get a louder speaker. So the 2-watt bass speaker is much louder than what's in the Black Series, and you get effects. Blaster block and blade lockup. Which turns on that white and gives you a really cool effect. Got the swing sounds and all that. And flash on flash. So you can see there are a lot of advantages. Before I forget, I do want to compare the brightness, because I know that's something that... Brightness is like one of those things, sort of like talking about graphics in a video game. It's one of those things that people really, really gravitate to when they're talking custom lightsabers, and it's understandable. The ones in the movies are very bright, and if you tried to create something similar to them in real life, those two would be bright. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the stock Black Series lightsaber. It's here in my right hand. Notice the brightness of that. I'm going to step a little bit closer to the camera so you can get a good look at that. Oh yeah, it looks pretty bright, right? Well, sure. Not really. And then this. So as you can see, huge difference. Huge difference. You would see a similar level of difference between a 1-up Kree versus this, really, which is 2-up right now because we're not running the white. But it would be almost as drastic. You get a little, maybe a 20% brightness boost using a tri-Kree. So not exactly like it's a massive gain by going to it, but you do get a good even blade and all that. I'm going to hold them right on top of each other and get a little closer. I mean, look, that's a huge difference. And that's, to me, is why I almost always convert these. When I first saw the Force Effects lightsabers, I was like, oh, I could live with that, but this is drastic. This is a big difference. So that'll kind of give you a feel for the brightness, and you can hear. You've heard the sound. I'm going to turn it off. Boom. So I hope that kind of gives everybody a good look at not only the Black Series Darth Vader saber, which is a good replica in and of itself, but also why I enjoy converting these over and the gains that I get from doing that. Typically, you're going to be looking at about $150 for the Hasbro Darth Vader. Now, you can find those on sale all the time. They're becoming a little less common. I've noticed, I think that Hasbro's getting ready for the next series of Black Series lightsabers, so we're starting to see supplies on the Darth Vaders dwindle a little bit. But you can still find them for $150 or less. I got that one on sale for a little over $100, and I think this one that I got from my buddy was like $80, brand new. So, but that was an unusual sale that I think was going on around May the 4th. So, this is overall, it's a good replica, but there are a lot of things that I like to change about them, and then most notably it's the aging electronics. If you have any questions about this, be sure to post them in the comments. I've got a full review of a written review of the Black Series Darth Vader on my website, armsofilm.net. It'll be linked in the description. I'll also probably be doing a more detailed rundown of this converted Black Series saber, at least a written version of it, and we'll have that in the description at some point too. Give me some time though, because I've got about 3 other articles to put together, not to mention stuff I do over on my main site. So that pretty well covers it. Also, be sure to check out the more in-depth video for this guy. That way you can get a feel for all the sound fonts, all the different effects, everything I was thinking about when I built it. That should be up probably. That'll be up before this video, so just be sure to check on that one. And if you have any questions, like I said, be sure to post them in the comments and or send me a message over on the site, and I will be sure to get back to you. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Thanks. Bye.